Hello, everyone. I'm Sha, the writing and research half of the Tales and Oracle of 11. Some of you may know me as Little Cat on this channel, but for those who are new, hello, 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 and I hope you're having a great week, month, year, and beyond. We learn a lot about where Shane comes from and how he grew up, who his role models were, and funny stories about folklore and the realities of once being a colony and existing as a vast archipelago in this session. Somewhere in this interview is spoilers for the Trese animated show that was adapted from the graphic novel. There will be markers for you to avoid it if you need to. Anyway, this is Shane, our guest artist from Philippines. I'm Sha, Little Cat. I play video games, and right now I'm talking to the amazing Shane. Shane, how would you like to be introduced? What are your pronouns, and where can the internet find you?
Yeah, so you can call me he or they. I'm good either way. And I try to be as online as possible on my Instagram. So that's Sidlakang Babaylan. Sometimes I stalk people in Twitter on Twitter, but I'm not as active anymore. But yeah, so Instagram.
How would you find yourself in the arts?
Do you mean how I started?
Yeah,
Like
so
what got
so
me to it?
being Asian means that if you say anything to your parents that detracts from the big five, I can only remember four right now, but it's lawyer, engineer,
Mm,
accountant,
mm.
I don't know if business person is in a thing. And you know that realm, doctor, very important. You would get some sort of feedback that goes by the way of, I don't know, it doesn't make money. So did you
Yeah,
did you go through
yeah.
that?
Yeah, especially with my generation where it was more offline as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just those basic, standard practices that you should really go for. Like you should study in the medicine field, or you should be an engineer. So I actually studied architecture first. So
Hey,
that was
hey,
yeah.
I'm interior designer. Hello.
Yeah, right. So that was, and I was 14, 15 at the time, so I didn't know better. So I
Uh
just
huh.
had to take what's closest to what I was passionate about, which was
Mm-hmm.
arts. I really started drawing in high school, so it's the closest thing other than studying actual fine arts, which to my parents is impractical.
Mm-hmm.
Which everyone is saying actually is impractical.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I studied architecture. It didn't last. I hate math. I'm terrible with numbers. So I actually had to stop going to college when I quit university and I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I left home and I went and lived with my sister who was in a different province. So I lived with her, and that's when I started looking for jobs, and I started as a part-time writer, which
Mm.
eventually grew out to marketing, which is what I'm doing now. So I never went back to school. Like architecture was great, and then I realized it's very constricting. It's very all rules, and I'm not that guy. I just I just want to do stuff that I want to do, and again, I was so young at the time. I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet,
Mm.
so I had to
Mm-mm.
go out and explore.
Mm. And that's the University of Hard Knocks is the best.
Yes,
University of
yes,
Life.
of
You
life.
mentioned something about hating math. I also do not like math. And then when I went to interior design, I remember my first year tutor announcing to the
Mhm.
entire class of 40 something students, going, right, we're going to learn how to budget. And then he paused and he looked around. He's like, what am I talking about? None of you are good at math. That's why you're in design. And then we just sat there like,
Oh yeah, there's a lot of budget relations to working with design,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
with your clients.
it's mostly money math. So yes, you found yourself doodling when you were young. What was the thing? Like, were you always pencil in hand or?
I was such an anime fan, so I
Mm-hmm.
actually started really liking what I see on TV. So I wanted to, I don't know, play with them after the show is done. So I just
Mm-hmm.
want to draw them again and, just redo what they did in the show. And then for a really long time, I didn't know how to draw. So I would ask and pay my classmates to draw it for me. And they would
Mm-hmm.
just do such an half-assed job. I know they could do better. And then I had to try it and do it myself. Just practicing and doing it myself. I drew a lot of Pokemon back in the day. So that's
Mm-hmm.
when I started, learning more about animals. I also really like drawing animals a lot.
Uh-huh.
So that's where my roots are. Really, I don't follow a lot of anatomy, but just it
I
looks
mean,
okay.
when you're drawing a lot of like animals, going back into like the days of yore with like
Hmm.
uh maybe not Bible drawings, but you know those drawings you would have from the Abbey at the fringe, the side of pages, or the dragon of Wales. Like I'm pretty sure a dragon doesn't look like that, but okay. So I
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
understand.
exactly. Yeah, and when I was younger, also well, we have a small farm, so
Hmm.
I would always ask my father to draw like pigs or goats. And he got so tired of me asking, he eventually showed me how to draw it. And he would teach me, like, you should have a tail like this, you should have, like, a hoof like this. So that's how I learned also. And sometimes when I'm drawing things that doesn't make sense, he would always correct me and say, no, no, the tail should be this part. And I would always draw it on the same part at the back. I wouldn't listen to him. And he would explain it to me. And sometimes when I draw cars and I would have all the four wheels all scrunched up in the front, and he would say that when someone rides the car, then it's gonna fall down at the back. There's no wheel
Oh
in the
my
back.
god. Your
so,
dad
so I
literally
was
went like, "This doesn't work in physics, son. What are you doing?"
exactly. Yeah, he was my first art teacher. So
Oh,
he
that's
he is
amazing.
the artistic of my parents.
Hmm.
So he likes to create stuff. He would build. He actually built most of the house. Like he would hire people, but he would like do most of the things himself. So I've seen him do things like he would be creating. He would be making like I don't know furniture. Like he'd probably make a reclining chair, and I'd watch him do it, and I play with his tools. So all those things that he did, I wanted to try also. So that was also fun when I was growing up.
That is wild. You have such a creative, very hands-on dad.
Yeah, yeah, he really is. Until now, actually, he would still, do stuff like normal dads. They won't just sit down and do nothing. They'll look for stuff to play with, to fix things that doesn't need fixing, and all those things.
I mean, you
Still
you
does.
start to consider this thing where, as an adult, you're supposed to know things, right? But there has never been a situation where I found myself stuck in a place where I'm not sure what to do something. And if I don't
Hmm.
go to Google, I will text my dad like, "How do you do plumbing? Like, what
I
is an
still do
S
that.
band?" Somehow they know
Most
things, and I don't know
Mostly
why.
for recipes. I would also ask him for like recipes. Like I know
Really?
I can just Google it, but I just ask him like there's a different way of how he would do some recipes. So I'd always
Hmm.
ask.
Before we actually got on call, I remember talking to you about mythology in general. You know so
Yes.
much, and I remember sharing with you a bunch of links. I want to know, like, how much do you know about your
Hmm.
country's folktales and oral history? Not just the ghost stuff, but the general
Hmm.
other stuff as well.
Well, to be honest, not a lot. We're such a big country with lots of different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Like as an archipelago, we might be neighboring islands, but our cultures and languages are very different.
Mm-hmm.
So to be honest, not a lot. I only know most folklore from other provinces based on mainstream media, like if it's on a show or if it was featured in a documentary or like a movie. So
Mm-hmm.
those kind of basic uh, folklore. Uh, but it's something that I always ask people whenever I meet someone from a different province. I would always ask them if they have like a different if they have horror stories. They always open with horror stories. Like what are the usual horror stories that you have at home? And it's usually almost always the same as
Uh-huh.
what we have at home. They just have different names or different different beasts
Mm-hmm.
in their version of the story, but it's almost always the same. So it's easy to relate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easy to well visualize what people are saying, even if they are different. But in a more technical aspect, I'm not 100% familiar with everything. There's a whole lot of world out there that I haven't even heard about yet.
Mm-hmm. I was doing some research for the book that I wrote for the Oracle and the Tales of 11, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The problem that I mainly came across is how to differentiate between pre and post colonization of Spain or by
Mm-hmm.
Spain
Mm-hmm.
on Philippines or the greater archipelago. How do you
Exactly.
sort of get around that? Like, there's so many stories about being a chaste. For example, since I'm a woman, I'm going to go with women examples, like a chaste and kind woman, and somehow all amazing women are just Maria, like all of them.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. So
how do you find more information?
well, the colonization happened like in the 1500s. It feels like forever ago, but it's not as um, it's not as early back in the day
Mm-hmm.
as you would think because it was a richer culture before then, and there aren't a lot of you know preserved texts or documentation of what stories are like back in the day before they came.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of blurred lines. The version is 95%, 96% probably what the Christians left us with.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the stories that are no longer available to us may not be as exact or not as accurate as they were back in the day. So it's just a retelling of an old story in the eyes of Christians, right? So, like what you said, like the Marias, like they were diwatas or they were like deities of the past,
Mm-hmm.
of the pre-Hispanic Philippines. But then, since the the church saw them as something that a lot of people believe in, they just relabel them, slap the name Maria before the names, and just call it like a version of the Virgin Mary.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to consistent people to Christianity if it's something that they may already know or they may already think exists anyway. So that's how they got it so easily back
Mm-hmm.
in the day. But
That's
most stories, like the usual, for example, the Manananggal, which is related to your Penangal,
mm-hmm.
I think it's preserved. But a lot of these um, folk folklore stories and creatures has been demonized. Like if not all, they've all been demonized. If they don't look right, then they should be evil, right? So I guess until this day, unless you do intensive research or if you really nitpick, you wouldn't know if it's something that was from pre-Hispanic, time, or if it's something that's already rewritten
mm-hmm.
and or even introduced by the
Yeah.
Spanish.
From all the tales that you've heard, from all the mythologies that you've consumed throughout your life, from
Hmm.
all around the world, what's your favorite?
I grew up with a lot of Disney,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of Disney stories, but even before, I've heard a lot of stories from my mom. So my mom is a storyteller of the parent team. So she grew up with Grimm stories.
Mm-hmm.
So she would retell these stories when when there's a typhoon and we don't have electricity. We would huddle and talk around the candle. And one of my favorite stories is in the most in demand story whenever that situation arises. The story of the wolf and the seven goats. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's close to Little Red Riding Hood, but she would retell it as because I grew up with five siblings, so there are six of us, right? So he would retell the story as the wolf and the six goats. So that's one of our favorite stories. It's this story about how the mother left the goats and then she warns them that a wolf might come by and try to come in. And so the wolf did knock on the door, right? And it was this raspy man asking to be let in. And one of the older sibling goats would tell them, "No, like, that's not our mom. You don't sound like our mom." And so he would always retell it in a way that it's set in our house. So she would set locations where we know that are familiar to us. So she would say that so she ran so the wolf ran to where we kept our chickens, and the wolf ate all of the egg yolks that he could. So his voice would be softer,
Uh-huh.
and he drank all the milk, and so I would make it easier for him to fool the goats. So that's one of my favorite stories. Eventually, he was let in. I think there's something about I don't know, rubbing flour all over his body so he doesn't look as black as he was. And then he would end up eating everyone except the youngest goat. And then the mother would arrive, and then the baby goat would tell mommy goat that all his siblings are gone, and that they would run to the river, I think, and the wolf is sleeping there. And so the mom would cut out the wolf, and all five baby goats would be let out, and they're safe. And then he would replace the goats with rocks.
Uh-huh.
It's very dark. It's a very dark story, but we really enjoyed it. And then he saw him back clean. And so when the wolf woke up, he was still full. He was full of rocks. So he would go down to the river to drink, and he would drown.
Oh, that's dark. That's hella dark.
That is so dark. And he would
Okay.
drown, and he died.
So your mom used to be the storyteller. This leads up to my next
Yeah.
question. Favorite tale from your country that might have been introduced by your
Uh,
mom, or wasn't your mom who told it?
I know, I probably heard it from school. So
Mm-hmm.
my favorite is actually the Ibong Adarna. Well, we probably have like booklets and like story booklets of those when I was younger. But
Mm-hmm.
it's something we that's taught as a curriculum in school. It's actually an epic poem,
Oh,
so it's taught as part of our language class. So it's the Ibong Adarna. Have you read about it?
I don't think so.
It's one of the probably one of the most popular stories because it's part of our high school curriculum. So it's taught to freshman students.
Mm-hmm.
So you study it all year. So it's a very long epic poem. So it's a whole book on its own. So it's it's a long story, but the main gist is that the king is sick and
Uh-huh.
he has three sons. And there's this legendary bird that's supposed to heal the sick by first singing. It's called Ibong Adar. Ibon is bird in the Filipino, so it's the Adarna bird.
The Adarna
So
bird. Okay.
yeah, so the king would send all three of well one at a time. He sent his sons to capture the bird for him to be healed, and Don Juan, the youngest, was able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of betrayal, like his two brothers would betray him a lot. The catch is to capture the bird. You shouldn't fall asleep because you can fall asleep when it sings. So it will make you fall asleep, and when it poops on you, you'll turn into stone. So it's like a
That
Medusa thing.
that is a weird concept. At first, I was like, "Huh, Jigglypuff. Oh no, this one poops on you. Oh no, you turn into stone."
Yeah, you'll be petrified when it's dropping at you. So it's it's not as funny. Probably like I understand the concept is it's funny. A bird pooping on you will kill you, but yeah, it's sort of like the norm.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the standard parts of the story, right?
Hmm.
So you shouldn't fall asleep. So the reason the third son captured him is that he actually cut himself. so he can't fall asleep.
Okay.
Um, so he cut himself and he like squeezed lime on his wounds. That way he can't really fall asleep. So that's how he was able to manage and catch the bird. And then there's a lot of princesses and kingdoms. So it's a whole epic story. So
I gotta check this out. This sounds
yeah, you
really
should, you
interesting.
should.
Has it been turned into any sort of like theater shows or um, plays or like TV shows? Because it's so popular.
It it has been, but not as like a direct, translation or an adaptation of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this like from probably from the 90s or the late 80s. It's one of those like kids traveling to that world and being captured by the bad guys in that story. One of those type of shows
Oh, okay.
where they're like present day kids are stuck in that world and they have to get the ibong adarna, but it's not as serious as like Lord of the Rings or Harry
Yeah.
Potter.
I feel like I can't say anything about the rest of the nations in Southeast Asia. I can say something about Malaysia. We're obsessed with ghosts,
Hmm.
but we only have like a handful of mythologies that we keep. And it sounds like Philippines is a lot more in touch with your mythologies, even though you were colonized. Is this correct? Is it an assumption?
Yeah, yeah. It's probably something that we just know are as stories.
Mm-hmm.
And well, most of them, when you're in the province, you're probably gonna be freaked out a bit. If you're alone in the woods, right? You're probably gonna assume like there's this ghost or monster that's gonna come for you. But as a whole, it's not as popular anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been so exposed to Western culture that most of our scary stories or like ideas of something scary has been so westernized. Like we're not scared of the insidious ghost
Mm-hmm.
coming, or like the ring. We're so influenced by a lot of media that we no longer really talk about, especially to the kids these days. I'm not sure if they're even as familiar as we were,
Mm-hmm.
because right now they are so distracted with a lot of social media, a lot of Netflix, that they no longer talk about make up stuff about their experiences when they were out camping in the woods last Saturday. They no longer talk about that. And like when I
Mm-hmm.
was in elementary school, when I would always talk to my friends, and they would say that they probably saw a giant bird. There are no longer kids talking about stuff like that anymore. So I don't think it's as preserved anymore.
I
I don't
think
think if I go
it's
out and ask,
yeah.
kids will know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also like you said because we're just stuck at home. Everything is so dangerous outside. You have
Hmm.
a lot of natural disasters happening, especially with the whole climate change thing going on. It's just unsafe to be outside. So the stuff that kids can consume come from screens. You
Hmm.
mentioned the big N, the Netflix. And there was a TV show that was, I don't know where it was produced, but it's definitely from a comic from Philippines. And I can't remember the name, but was it Babaylan or something like
Mm.
that?
Yeah, it's Trese. Uh,
Trese, yeah,
um,
that's the word. And that was when I sort of sat down and was like, it was, the acting was a little bit cringe. I'm not gonna lie. But
mhm,
otherwise,
mhm,
the ghosts and ghouls and monsters were so cool, and the tikbalang was so cool. Like, dude
mhm,
drove cars made of, and he was made of lightning.
mhm.
And if these kind of media did not exist, it wouldn't be passed down to the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, starting with Trese, I really enjoy the show. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to like it so bad. It's just as a Filipino who knows those characters,
Uh huh.
or have heard of those creatures, it's easy for me to catch up and follow the story, but I would
Uh-huh.
understand like someone without the same background
Mm.
would probably be asking a lot of questions like what is going on, like who are these people, what just happened. So I suggest if you have time, you read the books instead. So
Uh-huh.
they're actually graphic novels. So I think there are like 7 or 8 of them. I haven't read them myself. I just
Uh-huh.
watched it. So, but I've heard from a lot of friends, and a lot of cousins who read the book that it's preferable to the show. I have a lot of respect to the people who made the show. Obviously, it's
Mm-hmm.
great. It's a great introductory show of Philippine myth, but it should have been told better, in
Mm.
my opinion.
I feel like it could have been definitely, what was that word, advertised to a bigger
Mm-hmm.
audience. But
Yeah.
what did you think about how they came up with the monsters, or ghosts or mythical beasts? Like, was it
They're,
accurate to your mind's eye?
they're great. They have a lot of Western influences on them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, um, like the Nuno sa Punso, like the guy who runs under the tunnels. You remember that guy? Like he looks like a
The
goblin,
the creepy,
hobgoblin.
yeah, the one that sells information, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah, exactly. The traitor.
Yes. Oh,
Right. I'm not sure if you finished the show yet.
I finished it.
Uh, okay, great. So you won't get spoilers. So yeah, like that guy. The origin of that is actually from anthill mounds or termite mounds found in farms. So
Oh.
like where I'm from, we have a sugar cane plantation. So there are a lot of termite mounds
Mm-hmm.
when it's harvest season.
Uh-huh.
So it the story of the Nuno, Nuno comes from the word Ninuno, which is ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like ancestors of the land. So they're pictured as tiny goblins, tiny hobgoblins. Not unlike dwarves, maybe. And they're supposed to curse on you if you step or disrespect their mound. So when we pass through or when we see termite mounds, we would say tabi tabi po,
Mm-hmm.
which means excuse me, I'm gonna pass by. So I think it's because people has bad experience being bit by by the termite. So obviously, it's like there should be something magical about this. Like you should not disrespect it, otherwise your private parts are gonna swell.
Uh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
There
So it
has to
wasn't.
be like a story behind everything that happens, and if it's bad, because back
Hmm.
then people didn't have the ability to just Google things, or wildlife
Definitely.
people be like here going, oh yeah, it hurts because you got bit. No, they're like,
Yeah, or
no, ghosts.
yeah. So it's not even a ghost. It's a physical like dwarf.
Uh huh.
It's one of those face. Um, yeah. So that's one of those examples where in Trese they weren't really as it's a version of the of the Nuno
Mm-hmm.
probably. It's what it's how they were also depicted in the books anyway. So it's not really a problem with the show. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really just how these creatures are introduced. I mean, there's no direct version of it like how Harry Potter maybe depicts house elves, right?
Mm.
Like obviously we've heard of elves, but how they're depicted is that they're enslaved creatures, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's I think it's that kind of translation of these creatures that I think is important. If you're gonna change how they look or their origin, at least introduce them properly
Yeah.
to new audiences, especially.
Mm. I think I understand where you're coming from, especially for such a. I feel like Trece was too short, even though it's a whole series. Like there's just not
Yeah.
enough time to introduce each and everything, especially for a culture that is so rich in these mythologies. Like
Hmm.
I think we had a conversation about how every ethnic group has their version or has a version of mythologies. Like you mentioned the Luzon, the I
Yes,
can't remember the rest,
Visayas
the
in
Visayas,
Mindanao.
and so on and so forth. Like there's just so many, especially when you look at Philippines as an archipelago of just many, many, many islands.
Hmm.
So how, like, I cannot even begin to comprehend how they would introduce each and every aspect of
Hmm.
each and every ethnic group's ideologies with it. It's wild. Like you go in, you're like, oh my god, this is so interesting. This is gonna consume my life. And I'm the kind of person who eats this up. Like I grew up with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then the
Hmm.
spin-offs. I will watch. I will not watch horror movies. Like I cannot deal with it. I'm very easily scared. Ugh. But when it comes to supernatural, like the show Supernatural, ate it up.
Right.
But these are all like very, very Western versions of it. And ours would be so much scarier, so much more diverse, so much more intense. And I don't know
Hmm.
where to sit and think about it because I'm like, oh, will I enjoy that? It'd be scary. Maybe not. But we also have a lot of stories that are very uplifting, that are very non gender binary forward. I don't know
Hmm.
about Philippines. Do you have any ideas?
Can you give me an example of what you guys have?
I think the somebody brought up the Bulacacao.
Bulalakaw.
Bulalakaw, sorry. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that is a shooting star essentially that would spell disaster, but it has no specific gender. It's like an androgynous creature.
Depends on the version, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. The version that I know pictures them actually as women.
Mm.
So they're women deities. I think they have different names depending on their placement in the sky. Like there's a northern bulalakaw, a southern bulalakaw,
Ah,
and they would have different names.
okay, okay,
So
okay.
I think it would depend on a version of the story. But yeah, but most of these things like celestial stuff, they have been so um, they are pre-Hispanic, I would say. Like
Mm-hmm.
people would always see, look at the skies and see that there's something magical about it. So they would worship the sun and the moon. They would have names for the stars. It's just so sad that these things are not properly, preserved and documented. So we don't
Mm.
really have that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's present in art, like in carvings or in jars, in potteries. So
Mm-hmm.
these are still something you can see. It's just not well preserved in text.
Do you know of any problematic tales that would not be liked in this day and age?
Probably a lot of um, humans taking control of other creatures.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they're probably not real, but they could be real. Like for example, the tikbalang. Like
Uh-huh.
there's always a way to for a human to control these monsters. Like
Uh-huh.
there's always that um, there's always that way to make use of them. Like for example, the tikbalang, if you manage to get its one golden hair, then you're able to enslave it for the rest of its life, and you're gonna be its master. Or if you're gonna, there's this other type of creature called the sigun,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a shape shifting familiar of Filipino witches.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're just gonna do your bidding. So they're gonna kill for you. So a lot of those can be problematic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess coming from a Christian background, a lot of them has been demonized also. So there's no really good version of a story where a tikbalang would be the hero or
Mm-hmm.
even mermaids would be heroes. They're always the villain of all stories. They're always gonna lure men into sea. They're always gonna make sure you get lost in the woods. There's not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stories of like a good unless it's something closer to Christians like unless the Maria would help you
Mm-hmm.
when you're sick, but you need to pray for it. So it's the same. It's the same logic as when you were praying to the Virgin Mary. So something that would make you believe, I guess, in the faith, then that's good. But
Oh, okay.
anything else, they're evil. Like most monsters that I know, are gonna kill you, are gonna eat you, are gonna, steal your family. It's always like that.
Okay. I have a feeling that before the colonization happened, there were more uplifting, more open, more less othering of these creatures, these mythological
Mm-hmm.
creatures in stories. For example, one of the stories that we have in the book is about the Danag.
Mm-hmm.
They
The
they were
Danag.
once, yeah, they were once deities, and then they came down, stuff happened, and then now they're vampires because accidents. And I was like, surely there has to be more than this. Like, surely, because they were benevolent deities that helped
Mm-hmm.
people, taught people how to farm. They can't just suddenly decide like, blood tastes delicious. Like what? Like how?
Yeah.
This makes no
Yeah.
sense.
Exactly. Or like a lot of changes also happened when the Christians came, like even the Babaylan,
Mm-hmm.
or like with doctors in
Yeah.
general. So there's a whole umbrella. It's an umbrella term in the Philippines. So you could be a mananambal, which is like an herbalist, or you could be a mambabarang, which is a type of witch doctor that uses insects.
Mm-hmm.
So they would raise insects um, to either heal or destroy you. So there's never a good version of a witch doctor in the Philippines. It's always the bad kind, who is gonna, steal your soul, or who is gonna make sure you never feel better, or is gonna place a curse on you.
Mm-hmm.
So unless it's a priest, everyone else are evil.
Huh. Okay. I see how this is. Okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. There is a lion and a big old bird. What brought you to using both the Arimaonga and the Minokawa as the tale of choice? And can you tell me the short version of each of the stories? Because I know they're two different stories, right?
hmm Yeah, it's they're pretty similar. It's one of those stories again where it depends on which region is telling it or where you heard it from.
Mm-hmm.
But it's um, they're both creatures who swallows either the sun or the moon. So they're creatures of the dark. Um, they're related to the Bakunawa also, except the Bakunawa is a giant sea serpent.
Mm-hmm.
So in that version, it's actually the moon that the Bakunawa swallowed. So in that story, there were seven moons, and the Bakunawa swallowed six of them. He almost swallowed the seventh one, but he was scared into spitting it back out. For the Minokawa and the Aramanga, they're actually less popular versions of the same story.
Mm-hmm.
So um, what they swallow is the sun. So I'm really just liking the concept of of the Arimaonga and the Minokawa at the time when I was conceptualizing, because it was during it was more of a political take actually.
Uh-huh.
So it's when we were really feeling the loss of hope at the time, during the pandemic and then the election, the results of that election. So that's why I chose that piece.
What
Yeah.
directed the piece for you? Like it's very cyclical. You know how the Ouroboros eats its own tail? Is there a reason why you
Yes.
made it so that the sun is in the middle, but they're chasing each other?
Yeah. So it kind of looks like they're fighting over it.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of looks like they have the same evil plans. to make sure that everything falls into darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the two figures that who I see are leading now. So it was really at a dismal situation when I conceptualized and started drawing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of an artistic take also. I just want to make it look like there's no actual side or there's no right angle.
Mm-hmm.
So however way you look at it would show you the same visual of a lion or a giant bird trying
Mm-hmm.
to eat the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also like an artistic take of it.
I just really enjoy looking at it, and if you didn't put your stamp there, you don't know which way is up. You're absolutely right. You can just spin it around forever.
Yeah,
It does also remind me of like a family crest. Like you put this on
exactly.
a shield kind of thing, and it will protect
Hmm.
you. I did not get any dark vibes from this image at all.
Yeah, I know.
Like it's supposed to be negative, but somehow the sun is there offsetting that situation. So I guess in a way
Hmm.
it's like there's your hope. Sun is always going to
Yeah,
be there.
yeah, exactly. So I made sure that it's the brightest part of the piece,
Mhm.
and I actually had sketches where they are already biting or swallowing it, but I realized it shouldn't be as easy.
Mhm.
The sun shouldn't be easily taken over that way. So I made sure that the sun is still full,
Mhm.
and the rays are somehow moving and trying to send them back.
Uh-huh. Like swords.
So they're not really, yeah, exactly. They're not really attacking it, or they're not
Uh-huh.
really reaching the middle part yet.
I don't remember how in the story they let go of the sun.
It's always there's always going to be a hero or like a
Uh-huh.
village coming together. It's always that kind of ending. So in the version that I've read or heard, people would scare them, would make noises,
Mhm.
so they spit the sun back out. So it's always the same ending,
Okay,
regardless
okay.
of which beast it is.
So Arimonga is the lion. Minokawa is the bird. Do you know if
The
it's
bird.
a specific bird? Is it like a rock or
Yeah, probably close to the rock. Although it has an intricate um, look, so it's very tropical,
Mhm.
I would say, and it's very exquisite looking. So I
Mhm.
made it look. I didn't make it look as big or like an eagle. I made it look sharp, like a pin.
Mhm.
So it's still very intricate. Like I was imagining a woman's dagger, those kind of things. That's what I was going for when I designed it. Like something concealed and looks beautiful, but could be deadly.
Ah. Anyway, it's gorgeous. Okay, I had so much fun with you today, and we had like so many things to talk about. And I feel like I'm going to be talking to you a lot more
Yeah,
as we progress with the stories and with the language and everything. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I
thank
appreciate
you.
your time. I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate this beautiful piece of artwork that you've given us, and
Thank
the
you.
the public may acquire during the campaign. And it's a one-off. And please take care of yourself. Thank you everybody for watching this interview. Thank you to Shane for spending time with us. Do check out the Kickstarter and do check out all his links, which will be on the doobly doo. So just clicky the button, follow, subscribe, whatever it is you do on those channels. I don't remember anymore. Thank you. Bye. Mwah. Bye.